Before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping items. We really appreciate everyone joining us today for our public meeting via Zoom. I miss seeing everyone in the room, but at least this gives us an opportunity to take care of important basin matters. You will notice some of our board is here at the Collier Board of County Commissioners Chambers, and we are complying with the district and Collier County standards on social distancing and safety. Although some of us are here in person, all board business is being live streamed today via Zoom for the public and staff interaction with the board. And it is also being played on Collier TV and the district's website. Board members, I will ask that you speak up and make your close to the microphone so that you can be heard today, so that the public may hear every word, I guess it should say. Most of you that have joined via Zoom over the last months know the drill, but for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Here are some things you should know. Members of the public who wish to speak may use the raise the hand feature on Zoom. If members of the public are having trouble and need help, please go to our website, sfwmd.gov, and click the orange Ask Us button at the top of the page. If you are using a phone and would like to comment, please use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. So before we start today's board business, I would like to welcome our new basin board members. On December 18, 2020, Governor DeSantis appointed 3 board members to the Big Cypress Basin Board. Mr. Andy Hill, Mr. Dan Waters, who is returning for a second term, and Ms. Nanette Rivera. I look forward to working with all of you. I'd like to give the new board members an opportunity to introduce themselves. First, I'd like to start with Mr. Andy Hill, who is joining us by Zoom today. Mr. Hill, would you please unmute and do a brief introduction?
Good afternoon, Chair Roman. It's Andy Hill. Good to see you. I see everybody on my screen. I wish I was there with you. Just got a new knee installed a few weeks ago, so it's best I stay at home and not be driving on the roads. Just a little bit about me. I am a 30-year plus resident of Collier County. My wife and I own 2 homes, one in North Naples and another home on Chokoloskee, both which happen to be on the water, which that helps tie in with my interest in water issues. I do have a passion for fishing, which is probably the bind that has grown my interest over the last 30 years in our ecosystem, and then obviously the water. Professionally, I run an investment management firm, and I believe some of the issues that I deal with professionally would transfer to my responsibilities as a board member of the basin. Specifically, fiduciary responsibility is something I live with every day, and now I just have another responsibility for others, as well as also being able to bind the importance of our economic opportunities to our natural resources. So with that, I look forward to participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. Our next board member is Mr. Waters. Please take a moment to reintroduce yourself.
I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm happy to be back and happy to have the opportunity to serve with you again and with our new members. So just by way of background, again, my name is Dan Waters. Grew up in South Florida in Hollywood and attended the University of Florida and have lived here in Collier County for my entire professional career. So that's basically the last 22 years since 1999. Currently live in the city of Naples and work currently as a professional engineer. Have worked previously for the Water Management District in the world of the regulatory administration that the district provides. And so what I hope I can provide to this board and bring is just the perspective as somebody that has an engineering background and some of the challenges that we're going to face are And decisions we're going to make are going to be based in engineering and in those aspects of water management. And so, hopefully can bring something where, my background with working with different municipalities, with landowners, and having the perspective of all of those groups can come and be a valuable asset to this board. So again, happy to be back and happy to work with you again.
Oh, thank you so much. And lastly, Ms. Rivera.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Nanette Rivera. My husband and I have had the pleasure to own a home in Marco Island since 1999, which has a tremendous amount of wildlife near us. We are in one of the active waterways, and we have everything from dolphins and ospreys. We even have a turtle in our bay. And that is what has made me interested in getting involved in the natural resources of Collier County. I spent 40 years in the pharmaceutical industry between Chicago and the Northeast in the States, a lot of time overseas as well. And as an engineer, I relish problems because I have an attraction to problem solving. But now what I am trying to learn mostly is how our governments work and how our local communities affect change. After spending 40 years in the industry, I think I have that one a little figured out, but this is a new puzzle palace that I need to learn how to make my way through. Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Well, thank you all very, very much. And I know that I speak for everyone when I say that we're so thrilled to have these board seats filled. And I really, really appreciate all that you'll come to bring to the board and look forward to working with you. One of our first items of business today is to elect a vice chair. Because we have new board members and more new members may be coming, I feel it is important that our vice chair be someone with experience on this board and who is familiar with our operations in terms of flood protection, operation and maintenance, as well as our capital program and projects. Because Mr. Dan Waters has served on the Basin Board from June 2017 through August 2020 and was just reappointed by Governor DeSantis, I feel he would make an excellent vice chair. Therefore, consistent with Florida statute, I'd like to move that Mr. Dan Waters be our vice chair for a period of 1 year. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Rivera. I'll now conduct a roll call vote. Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Waters?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The motion passes 4-0. Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you. And I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Agenda revisions is our next item on the agenda. Ms. Keeler, are there any agenda revisions today?
No, Madam Chair, there are not.
Okay, great. Are there any abstentions by board members for items on the agenda? I will be asking each board member. Ms. Nanette Rivera, do you have any abstentions or from anything on the agenda?
No, I do not.
Okay, Mr. Andy Hill,
No, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Waters?
None for myself either.
Okay, I have none as well. The next item is acceptance of the minutes of the August 27, 2020 and November 18, 2020 Big Cypress Basin board meetings. Because some of our board members were not with us at the previous meetings, we will be voting to accept the prior minutes. And I would ask for a motion and a second to accept both the August 27th and November 18th minutes. We'll do them together. Could I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to accept the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
Okay, second by Mr. Hill. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The vote passes 4-0 to accept the minutes. That brings us to general public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to speak on an item not on the agenda today, you may use the raise the hand feature in Zoom. If you are using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. The 3-minute comment guideline will apply, and you will see a timer on your screen. So we appreciate you abiding by this. There are 2 general public comment periods in our meeting. The other one is at the end of the meeting. So if you think of something during the meeting, you still have an opportunity. These comments are for items not on the agenda. Aaron, are there any public comments?
Madam Chair, no.
Okay, we'll give them a couple minutes just in case. Are any hands raised, do you see?
Still no, Madam Chair.
Okay, then we'll move on then. The first presentation we have today is on Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Akeem Owasana is going to introduce the project and the presenters, and Sean Clem and Brad Cornell will provide the project updates. Akeem, good to see you this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, and welcome to all the new board members. We look forward to working with you all over the next several years. I got it. Right. So today, I'm introducing a couple of speakers from Audubon Corkscrew, who will be sharing the results of some work that you partially funded. But before we get started with that introduction, I thought I'll provide a little bit of background and some context. About 2 years ago, researchers from Audubon Corkscrew noticed an issue that they thought was disturbing in Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. They were seeing, especially in the area around Lettuce Lakes, an area where they have a long period of data, 60 years worth of data. They were seeing areas that were often always inundated, were getting drier and drier in the dry season. They brought those issues to the Basin Board at your 2018 October business meeting, and they raised a number of potential causes, things that could be responsible for the change in hydrology that they were observing. They asked for your support to investigate those potential sources, and the board provided some funding to support this work effort. The board also directed staff to take a quick look at some of our water management system to see if any of the upgrades we made could be responsible for some of the effects being observed. Our staff did some work. We evaluated all of the changes that have been made to our system over the last 20 or so years. And we modeled all of them to see if there could be a cause in the drawdown that was being observed. We identified that while there was some potential effects, it was limited to the lower part of Corkscrew Swamp. We also looked at the Corrie structure, which was a new structure being built at the time, which provided us opportunity to hold water in the Corkscrew area, and demonstrated that it could have a beneficial effect, but also somewhat limited. We then engaged the team from Audubon Corkscrew and worked on a plan that they were going to execute to do a more rigorous modeling analysis to look at those causes that they identified in their presentation. Around the same time, we're aware of an effort by then Charlotte Harbor NEP, now Coastal and Heartland NEP, and we brought this to their attention because the district was interested in both efforts and wanted to make sure they were compatible and consistent. So the status of the project as of today, we entered into an agreement. This was back in early 2020. The project was scheduled to end in March of this year. The Audubon team has completed the main deliverable, which is a technical report that has been reviewed and finalized. And the last deliverable on their agreement is a presentation to the board to share their findings. And that's what will be satisfied with today's presentation. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sean Clem to talk about the results of the work they've done.
Thank you, Akeem.
Thank you so much for having us here today, Madam Chair, and congratulations and welcome to our new board members. It's nice to meet you today. I'm a community ecologist, which means I study connections between plants, animals, and driving forces in our ecosystem. I've been working throughout the Everglades ecosystem for over 20 years, and my colleague Brad Cornell and I are excited to be here today to share results from this hydrologic modeling project that was completed over the past year with the basin's support. Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary is a 13,000 acre National Audubon Society sanctuary located at the heart of the over 60,000 acre Corkscrew Regional Ecosystem Watershed. The sanctuary is home to the largest remaining stand of old growth bald cypress in the world and is recognized as a wetland of international importance by the Ramsar Convention and a wetland of distinction by the Society of Wetland Scientists. The sanctuary owes much of its conservation status to this species, the wood stork. For well over a century, nearly every winter and spring, the old growth bald cypress trees that are now found within Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary have supported a wood stork colony, a colony that historically was the largest wood stork colony in the US. In the early 1900s, the National Audubon Society sent a deputized warden to live within this colony to protect it from plume hunters. In the late 1940s, when logging was sweeping across the Big Cypress, Audubon acquired the property in order to protect the colony site from logging. In more recent years, Audubon's focus has broadened as we continue to work to protect the sanctuary's natural resources, but now are often focusing on stressors that are coming from beyond our boundaries. The earliest estimate of the size of the Corkscrew colony was made in 1910, when over 100,000 birds were counted in the colony. Audubon staff began annual surveys of wood stork nesting in the late 1950s. By the 1970s, we'd seen the annual nesting numbers begin to decline. And while the numbers of nesting pairs decline significantly concurrent with development and subsequent loss of wetlands, the wetlands that these birds use to feed, storks continued to nest annually until the mid-2000s. In 2007, we began to see a pattern where wood storks failed to nest at Corkscrew more often than they nested, with wood storks nesting in the sanctuary only 5 times in the last 15 years. In those 5 years, averaging only 125 nests per year compared to the thousands of nests per year that we saw in the 1960s and the 1970s. Throughout the Everglades, the scientific literature is clear that hydrology drives the production of aquatic prey. More water results in more fish and crayfish, and the availability of that aquatic prey is what limits wading bird populations. More available food results in more wading birds. It was with this in mind that we first started looking into Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary's hydrology, hoping to answer the question, what has changed for wood storks over the past few decades that could be causing the decline that we've been observing? We are fortunate to have a couple of long-term data sets to tell us some of this hydrologic history. For reference, here is the sanctuary's Blair Audubon Center and our 2¼ mile boardwalk, along which we have several locations where long-term data were collected beginning in the late 1950s. Mike Duver and I analyzed and published these data with peer review in 2019. At first glance, it was apparent that our hydrology had changed over time, but that these changes had gone somewhat unnoticed because our annual and interannual hydrology is so dynamic. One of the places the change was most apparent was along the boardwalk at the lettuce lakes, where wading birds gather in a feeding frenzy every spring. We saw this area dry down completely about once every 5 years from the 1960s to 1990s, but from the 2000s to 2019, it dried down 4 of every 5 years. And when it dried down, the dry down lasted 40% longer. Notably, our analyses indicated no change in rainfall patterns over this same time period. We then looked at this change over time to try to better understand the timing. This graph represents water levels at the staff gauge at the lettuce lake in a typical year in the 1960s. The x-axis, or the horizontal axis, shows the hydrologic year from June 1st to May 31st. And the y-axis shows water depth at that gauge, with 0 representing the ground level. Here in the 1960s, you can see water levels rise in the beginning of the wet season, reach an annual peak in October, and then water levels slowly fall throughout the winter and spring months that coincide with wading bird nesting season. This long, slow water level recession is critical for concentrating fish into depressions that allows wading birds to collect enough food to reproduce and fledge chicks. Looking at the shape of this graph decade by decade, we see a similar pattern in the 1970s, in the 1980s, and the 1990s. And then we saw a dramatic change in the 2000s. Water levels are still reaching a similar wet season peak in October, but water levels are falling below ground in May and not returning above ground until late June. And the slope of the line, or the speed at which water levels are falling throughout most of the nesting season, is much greater. We saw a similar pattern to this in a typical year in the 2010s. So again, just to emphasize the change in the shape of this graph, here you can see the 1960s side by side with the 2010s. When we looked at what this change looks like across our native habitats, we saw that hydroperiod, which is the number of days water levels are above ground each year, in our freshwater marsh declined by 29% or became 2.6 months shorter. The hydroperiod of our iconic bald cypress decreased by 18% or became 1.9 months shorter. And that of our pond habitat, which ultimately serves as the deep water refuge for aquatic animals like alligators and otters, decreased by 17%, also becoming 2 months shorter. So what are some of the implications of this change? Well, for wildlife, in addition to reducing the amount of food available for wading birds, alligators, and other fish-eating animals, overdrying of nesting sites can make the actual nests more vulnerable to terrestrial predators like raccoons. And we actually saw this in Corkscrew for the first time in 2018. For our plant communities, standing water throughout the dry season moderates the microclimate, the humidity and temperature that our subtropical plants depend on. Dry conditions make it harder for our land managers to maintain native communities using fire, and an overdried swamp becomes vulnerable to catastrophic wildfire. Shortened hydroperiod decreases our capacity for recharging the aquifer. And the less time fresh water flows through our inland wetlands, the less filtration those wetlands provide. We also know that changing the hydroperiod of our inland wetlands can change the timing and quantity of freshwater inputs to our estuaries. So where could this water be going? We focused for this project on 4 factors most likely to be contributing to the observed changes at Corkscrew: groundwater withdrawals for agriculture, groundwater withdrawals for residential use, increased evapotranspiration resulting from a change that we've seen in plant communities across our region, and water management for flood control. I think it's important to note here that none of these drivers or stressors are unique to Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. This research, I believe, is highly relevant throughout Southwest Florida and provides insights that can be applied in many parts of South Florida and beyond. The modeling project we just completed focused on the area immediately surrounding the sanctuary, which is shown central to the slide here in yellow or in green. Audubon contracted water science associates, bringing on Roger Kopp, Kirk Martin, and Marcelo Lago as our modeling team. Essentially, what we did was build a model that depicted current conditions and then ran scenarios that represented dramatic changes in the hypothesized drivers. It's important to note that all of our first 3 scenarios were extreme and were somewhat unrealistic and only intended to move the needle to allow us to really understand the relative contribution of factors. The first scenario was actually run as 3 different scenarios. First, we eliminated all agricultural pumping within the model domain, groundwater pumping from all of the farms that are shown here in peach. When we did this, one area of Corkscrew actually became drier. It seemed that this area is wetter than it was historically due to farms pumping enough water that it raises the water table in this localized area. Elongating the hydroperiod in this area is making land management challenging, as this area currently does not dry out long enough to use prescribed fire as a land management tool. In the second scenario, or the second run of this first scenario, we eliminated all public well fields, which are seen here as on this map as white dots. While this change increased the hydroperiod in Flint Penn Strand, there was no impact on Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Finally, we eliminated both agriculture and well fields, which resulted in a modest hydroperiod increase along the board that could be seen along the boardwalk, something on the order of water that's 6 inches deeper and a hydroperiod that was a few weeks longer. So we saw a significant hydrologic change from eliminating pumping, but the model did not return the sanctuary to anything close to the 1960s or 1970s conditions that had been lost. The second scenario focused on removing willow, which is a native woody shrub that's been spreading across marshes and wet prairies throughout the Corkscrew watershed, and has even become a problem in other parts of the Everglades and other parts of Florida. This shrub has a higher evapotranspiration rate than the sawgrass that it generally replaces, and studies have suggested that the spread of willow can result in a net water loss to an ecosystem. In our modeling, removing the willow reduced the amount of water lost to evapotranspiration, but the water savings was not enough to result in a noticeable change in hydrology for the sanctuary. Our third scenario focused on eliminating drainage associated with flood control downstream of the sanctuary. For this scenario, we eliminated all canals and water control structures in this polygon that's outlined here in yellow, which is located south of the sanctuary and both north, east, and west of Immokalee Road. Again, eliminating flood control in this region was never meant to be a realistic scenario, only one that we could use to look at the impact this may be having on the sanctuary. We found that downstream drainage is far and away the greatest stressor on the system, and reducing downstream drainage will be the key to restoring appropriate hydro periods in Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. When we removed these canals, we saw a significant increase in sanctuary water levels and hydro period. In this graph, you can see current conditions in red. You can see that the water levels dip below ground every year, nearly every year. And the scenario outcome is in blue, and you can see we don't dry down completely, which is actually pretty similar to what we saw in Corkscrew in the 1960s and the 1970s. It's also worth noting here that we do know that downstream conveyance associated with the Corkscrew Canal was improved in the mid-2000s, around the same time that we began to see a significant hydrologic change in the sanctuary. Knowing that completely removing flood control downstream of the sanctuary is not realistic for the final scenario, we focus on what we can do. We explored options that would reduce outflows from the sanctuary while maintaining flood protection for our neighbors, the homes and businesses south of the sanctuary. In this scenario, we added a berm and clay cutoff wall along the northernmost trail at Bird Rookery Swamp, which lies just south of the sanctuary, along with some new weirs and operations changes to existing structures. This scenario demonstrated that retaining groundwater through the dry season is possible with engineering, but we weren't able to see as much hydrologic improvement as we were hoping to see. We identified a need for improved topography and monitoring data in this region in order to develop a more robust mitigation strategy for the sanctuary. So to conclude, our modeling project suggested two driving factors significantly impact sanctuary hydrology: downstream drainage and groundwater pumping. Downstream drainage clearly had the greatest effect, and we found that we were able to reduce some of that drainage through engineering and operations changes. But more work really needs to be done to develop a comprehensive mitigation plan to restore Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary's hydrology. We found that in wetlands immediately downstream of agriculture, groundwater pumping had a negative impact on sanctuary hydrology, which creates a real challenge for our land managers since it fosters the spread of willow and inhibits prescribed fire. We also found that while removal of invasive woody vegetation like willow has clear benefits for wildlife, this type of restoration does not result in significant water savings for the sanctuary. My colleague Brad Cornell will now share Audubon's policy recommendations that stem from the results of the study.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. Again, let me add my congratulations as well to your new appointments and reappointments. So I look forward to working with all of you. So let's see, get my, oh, here we go. The Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary hydrologic model is a very powerful new tool, not only for the information it provides Audubon to diagnose the causes of a 20-year decline in water levels and all the harm attenuating that decline, but also illuminating the regional nature of watershed hydrologic impacts and solutions. That regional nature requires Audubon to work collaboratively with the Big Cypress Basin, the South Florida Water Management District, local governments, and all Audubon's landowning neighbors in order to solve these grave challenges for everyone's mutual benefit. Following are some ideas on new policy strategies to consider in this wider regional context. Starting off, let's consider demands for flood protection and the need to hold more stormwater. This map that you're looking at, the blue sections show Bonita Springs areas that flood every 5 years. We all should strongly support the buyout of properties which repeatedly flood to help lessen the demand for flood protection and drainage from upstream wetlands. Likewise, retrofitting old stormwater systems and designing new ones to hold more water throughout our watershed basins will further hydrologic health. Collier County's Watershed Management Plan, adopted in 2011, identifies low-impact development as a primary non-structural stormwater strategy objective. Likewise, the Southwest Florida Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan, adopted by the district and the Army Corps of Engineers in 2013, provides data and analysis on many projects to improve water resources throughout the region. Understanding the regional nature of this watershed issue and using the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary model as a basis, Audubon and the basin should collaborate with other major watershed science and restoration efforts, including the Lee Flood Mitigation Plan and the South Lee Watershed Restoration Initiative Modeling Project, plus acquisition and restoration of strategic parcels like the Crew headwaters shown here in green. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this area to the northwest of Lake Trafford, or expanding the Southern Crew project to the north is a critical way to protect Crew resources. Rulemaking should be pursued to add environmental resource program and Section 404 wetland permitting criteria to avoid building in floodplains. Likewise, we should consider rule criteria to prohibit any discharges which would harm downstream conservation lands. This is an image of the Crew Marsh from an airplane looking southwest. Public investments and partnerships are needed to retrofit existing water management systems that are shown to harm their neighbors. As noted in the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary modeling results, public water supply wells can undermine wetlands even as far as 5 miles away. This lower West Coast water supply plan map that we're looking at shows the prevalence of surficial aquifer sourced supply wells, all in blue. Next steps. We need, as Dr. Clem had pointed out, we need more monitoring data collected using additional sites. We must solve the problem of inaccurate LiDAR topographic data where tree canopies and water confuses the data. And we need to run additional modeling scenarios to test more options to address the problems that have been identified. Above all, the science is very clear on the canal over drainage causes that we're seeing. Now, collaboration with landowners, agencies, local governments on a regional basis is what's necessary to solve these water problems for everyone's mutual benefit. And just finally, I want to register Audubon's sincere thanks to Roger Kopp and Kirk Martin of Water Sciences Associates and Marcelo Lago of Lago Consulting and Services for their excellent modeling work. Special thanks also to Dr. Mike Duver and Ananta Nath. And we are very grateful to the South Florida Water Management District and the Big Cypress Basin, including Akina Wasina, Kent Fang, Lisa Keeler, and the chair, Charlotte Roman, for their collaboration and support of this project. And right now, we're happy to entertain any questions that you all may have.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. So we'll go to board members if you have any questions for the presenters. And we're on a light system today. So if you would like to speak, if you could press the button to the right of where you're sitting, if you're in the room. And for Mr. Hill, if you would raise your hand on Zoom, then I will be able to recognize you as well. So are there any questions from the board members? Mr. Waters.
So first, thank you for the presentation and the work. It really is impressive, and not so much even a question as much as a comment. It's pretty clear from the information you have that Corkscrew looks to me like it's at a tipping point, and I would wholeheartedly support more hydrologic data gathering, and again, just figuring out how does our operation impact that, and how are those two things correlated, and let's get a long-term period of data and record, and try and figure out what the things that we can do are to try and help with the situation there. So that's basically just my comment. And I think this is all just such a long period of data. It's great to have, and great to be able to see that there is something hopefully that we can do to help.
Thanks, Mr. Waters. And clearly data are important, but then you have to do some analysis of that data, of those data, to figure out what do they mean? What's the relevance? What's the significance of the trends that we now have identified? So your support for that analysis and trend identification is critical.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
I have a couple questions just for clarification. Dr. Clem, when you were talking about on page 16, the shorter hydro periods in the swamp, and you were talking about the months of the shorter time frame, and keeping in mind that I had this conversation with Audubon 2 years ago, where you briefed me on some of the impacts to wood stork nesting. Can you tell us in simple terms what the shortened hydro period really impacts, so we can relate to it better?
Sure. Well, obviously the shortened hydro period means for example, a wet prairie, maybe you would have water standing for 6 months rather than 8 months. And the additional months that have been lost for that are critical because, when those wetlands are filled with water, they provide habitat for a growing fish community. And with when hydro period is decreased, the ability for the ecosystem to support a larger fish community is decreased, and you're basically decreasing the prey base that's available for all of your fish eaters, your wading birds and alligators and otters. The other part of that is that the hydro period is also determining the vegetation in those habitats. So we'll see successional changes, changes in vegetation across our habitats as well. In large part, that seems to be the system becoming more woody, or more habitat structure coming in. So not only are we losing the prey base, but we're also bringing more habitat. We're increasing the habitat structure in the habitat, which is decreasing the ability for these predators to get into that habitat to feed when water and fish are available.
So in the case of the bald cypress, the period being shortened 2 months,
Right.
what does that actually impact?
Well, that means that those 2 months, we don't have standing water underneath the bald cypress that serves as a temperature buffer and a humidity buffer for the plants that are in the canopy underneath the bald cypress. Specifically things like the ghost orchid or some of our other epiphytes, I think, are most sensitive to some of those kind of changes. It also means, one of the things that wood storks rely on for their nesting, they nest high in cypress trees, and they choose to nest in trees that have standing water beneath them, because there's a mutualism between wood storks and alligators. Alligators live in the water beneath the cypress trees, And then the mutual benefit is that, you know, the alligators get whatever food happens to fall out of the nest, whether it's fish or chicks. And the alligators serve to defend those nests and keep raccoons from going across and climbing those trees and getting into the nests. So when we lose the water underneath when we lose water underneath those cypress trees, we lose that defense. And that's something that we saw for the first time in 2018 when the cypress forest dried down and we had whole subcolonies of wood storks decimated by terrestrial predators.
So after completing this study, based upon what your initial thoughts were, the thoughts that you shared with me when we met so long ago, and to today, 2 years later, where you've actually completed your study, what have you determined was valid about what your hypothesis was, and what has been proven to not be valid? Do you have that kind of summary?
Well, I mean, we went into this project with, you know, a whole handful of things thinking, well, it could be any combination of these. You know, the impacts that we're seeing could be a large part of this thing and a large part of this other thing. And for me, the outcome of the study was being able to narrow our focus and saying, well, it's not this. We don't need to worry as much about this. And maybe this is causing a little bit of a problem in some areas, but it's not causing the bulk of the problem that we're seeing in the heart of the cypress forest. And it's allowing us to really focus in on the drainage issue, which I think gives us direction for moving forward.
Okay, Mr. Hill has a question, and then I'll save my others for later. We'll go to Mr. Hill.
Just wanted to comment. I don't have any questions. Just thought it was an excellent presentation, and a couple of things that came to mind you've already addressed. Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair,
Yes, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add one more point to the last question you asked about what we have learned. The other factor to keep in mind is these water level impacts that have now been identified to be caused primarily, but not only, but primarily by canal drainage from the south are in the context of a multi-decadal loss of wetlands in the whole region, particularly shallow seasonal wetlands. So when you combine the effects of wetland destruction loss and water level decline in the dry season, that's the sort of 1-2 punch that has been really decimating the Corkscrew ecosystem.
Say that again, Brad.
So it's a combination of water level impacts. We're losing water, and we now know why, and we know the scale of it through measurement, through a 60-year data set. But it's in the context of also having many decades of wetland destruction in this same region. So when you put the two together, water loss, water level decline, and wetland losses, you have a 1-2 punch on the ecosystem in the Crew system, in Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary particularly.
Thank you for that. I would be in support of actually having our staff look at these results and look at do some more analysis on this and come back to the board and maybe with some steps forward, some actual steps forward that we can actually take and consider in a collaborative way to see what's the best way to proceed. And because right now we've just got the study, I think there's some further analysis necessary. You've got a wide swath of policy recommendations, Brad. They all don't belong to the big Cypress Basin board, but certainly I appreciate you laying them all out there for us. But I'd like to suggest that we do that as a board, that we recommend that the Akina Awasana, that him and his team take a look at that, and also the big Cypress Basin engineers and come back to us. So that's my thought. Go ahead.
If I can add just one other thing, you know, one of the recommendations that we made was to improve the topography data, which is much needed for the sanctuary. We, in the last few weeks, have taken that first step. We actually have a crew on the ground today actually they're in Bird Rookery Swamp today, trying to figure out how to get those topography data. So have already, you know, put one foot forward in trying to fill in the data gaps that will be necessary for that next step.
Yeah, as I understand, you knitted together various topography models to try to make that assessment. So that's absolutely necessary. And maybe the district team can help in identifying what's needed there. And if we have anything, we can look into that and see. But what we need to do is we need to have a good, strong collaborative effort to analyze this initial report and map out what we can do going forward, if anything, to improve that hydrology at Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Unless, does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Go ahead, Ms. Rivera.
Well, I would also drive home focused on the fourth item that you presented, which was the retention, the berms, the retaining the groundwater locally, what that would look like in terms of what are the options and what it would look like. And did your modeling take it back to the 2 months that we're losing, or?
No, we didn't get nearly as close as we had hoped to. And that at that point is where it raised, the issue of needing the topography data to get to that finer scale resolution of really being able to look at the system on that scale and make those kind of mitigation suggestions.
So at this point, it's directional, but not definitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think we proved that we can hold on to some of that water, and hopefully, it's possible that some of that topography data will show us that we actually would be able to hold on to more water than we thought under that model, but we really need we need more data in the system to be able to really fine tune that and understand it.
Because it'll make a lot of difference whether it's a 2.5 month solution or only a 2-week solution.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Waters?
Yep. One last quick question, and the answer to this maybe we don't know until you've got more data, but is it purely flow to the south that you see as the culprit, or is some of that escaping to the west as well?
Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics of, that water movement under some of those scenarios, but the scenario that we ran where the canal and structures were removed was all of that downstream drainage. And so we didn't really, do anything with changes on that west side. So I think that we showed that the operations on the south side are definitely making that impact. The magnitude at which things on the western side could be impacting, I'm not sure we know the answer to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Erin, is there any public comment on this item?
I have no public comment at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think what the consensus is that of the board is that we would like a little bit more analysis, work with our district and our basin board staff to see if you can't work together and come back to the board when you're ready on the steps forward on what we can actually, help with. Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary is one of the gems of Southwest Florida. I've been here 20 years. I've visited the swamp probably within the first week I was here and have been out there recently. There are changes, and I know the Basin Board's been very supportive. We've supported your efforts with exotic removals in the swamp, and this board has placed an importance on that place in our community as well. So more work is needed, some analysis is needed, work with our experts on that, and then come back to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We appreciate your support.
Okay, that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is the Big Cypress Basin Boundary Modification. We're going to have Jeffrey Udicello present and also Candida Heater for this item, and they're joining us from West Palm Beach via Zoom. So we'll begin with Jeffrey Udicello.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I got you loud and clear.
Okay, so if you got my audio. Mark, I don't see the presentation yet. There it is. Okay. Well, good afternoon. Again, my name is Jeffrey DiCello. I'm an engineer in the Hydraulics and Hydrology Bureau of the South Florida Water Management District in the modeling section. And this afternoon, I'm here to present on the Big Cypress Basin boundary modification. As a way of introduction, the driving force behind this bill came out of last spring's legislative session, House Bill number 5001. The full text of the bill is shown there in blue. I will not go over that verbatim, but there's 3 summary points listed at the bottom. The first is that the South Florida Water Management District is to examine the BCB watershed boundaries and to propose revisions as needed. Secondly, the methodology was to implement a scientifically supported approach. And third of all, the study was to be submitted to the state authorities in Tallahassee by February 1st of this year. Of course, that's now behind us, but our team started working on this in roughly April or May of last year. So let's take a minute and talk about what a science-based watershed delineation actually is. First of all, it's an approach that divides regional land areas into smaller units or watersheds based on physical laws. Secondly, it considers the actual environmental features of a landscape. And third of all, as we all know, land elevation is a key factor defining the runoff from the rainfall. There are a variety of other factors that are included in analysis like this. I have a handful listed here, such as land use, man-made improvements to drainage features, animal habitats, and subsurface properties of aquifers, but there's other factors as well. Additionally, a science-based watershed delineation is based on the measurements of physical properties, and therefore it would be repeatable and verifiable by independent observation. And finally, as I mentioned, it considers a variety of sources of information. And just as a way of contrast, the focus on a science-based watershed delineation kind of begs the question, what other methods are out there to do a similar study? And so contrasting approaches may use political or legal factors to establish boundaries, such as administrative boundaries like county lines or landowner property limits. I'll walk through here the methodology that we used for this delineation. There are a total of 9 steps, and I'll walk through them here for you one by one. So step 1 is to review the current catchment boundaries. Using a geographic information systems framework, or GIS, overlay the existing boundary maps and coverages. And this enables us to examine where existing lines are and where they match up with each other or where they may differ from each other. Step 2 is to evaluate the topography. Use digital elevation data within the GIS framework to compare the high and low landscape elevations with the catchment boundaries. Step 3 is to examine the aerial photography, survey old and new satellite imagery, flyover pictures, etc., to assess current and historical land use, natural drainage features, and any kind of man-made drainage modifications. Step 4 is to review road maps. As we know, roads are typically constructed on higher land surfaces, but around them, they may have bridges, culverts, or ditches that affect drainage in the local areas. Step 5 is to conduct a field visit. On-site reconnaissance will help confirm drainage patterns and features. Field visits are particularly useful immediately after a large rainfall event. There's sometimes we can get out to the field within a few hours or certainly within a few days of a large rainfall event. And this gives us a priceless boots on the ground perspective of where the runoff is and how the water flows in those local regions of a given landscape. Additionally, at the district, we're fortunate we have helicopters and we have drones. And so on occasion, immediately after a rainfall event, we can go out and use those pieces of equipment and technology to be able to get kind of customized aerial perspectives and photographs to further provide insight. Step number 6 is to review permits. Regulatory actions and authorized permits, such as the district's environmental resource permits or ERPs, will describe drainage patterns and modifications resulting from permitted projects in the area. Step 7, when they're available, review soil maps. Soil maps are a valuable secondary source of information on land use, vegetation, and subsurface hydrology. Step 8, again, when it's available, review other historical documents, such as county road maps from the past or any kind of USGS information. Sometimes private landowners have personal photographs, aerial photography of their farms or their properties, and any kind of information like that may provide additional useful information. And finally, step 9, distribute the proposed delineation for review. And this is to seek additional review from subject matter experts. Let's take a minute and define some of the terms that we'll be using today and some of the terms that were used in the study and in the report that was written about this study. These definitions come from the district's ArcHydro Enhanced Database, or AHED, and the totals are shown here within AHED from the largest land area to the smallest. And so within the AHED system, a basin is the largest land area, and in the entire South Florida Water Management District jurisdiction, there's a total of 4 of these basins. The next smallest land aggregation is considered a sub-basin, and there are a total of 12 of these throughout the district's jurisdiction. And just as a note, the Big Cypress Swamp that we're talking about today is considered one of those 12 sub-basins. The next smallest land aggregation is considered a watershed, and there's 227 of those in the district. And then the smallest land aggregation within the AHED system is called a sub-watershed, and there's a total of 633 of those in the district. And just as a note, earlier drainage studies or projects in other areas of the district may follow other definitions, but throughout this project and the report that was written with it, this is a terminology that we'll use. This is an overhead map of the entire region. There's a lot of information on this map, and I won't show everything, but I'll highlight a couple key features. And I'll use the mouse here. So first and foremost, the first thing to notice is the green line here. This boundary is the existing sub-basin boundary, thank you, of the Big Cypress Swamp sub-basin. So that is one of those 12 sub-basins that we're talking about. The sub-basin immediately to the east is called the Everglades sub-basin, and the sub-basin to the north is called the Caloosahatchee sub-basin. There are a handful of large, kind of dominant natural wetland areas within the sub-basin. First of all, kind of in the east and the southeast is the Big Cypress National Preserve. And then just to the west of that is the Big Cypress Swamp. Additionally, in the northern reach of this sub-basin is the OK Slough, the Callaway Coochie Slough, as well as the Corkscrew Marsh. The blue lines that you see on this map are waterways. The straight ones are man-made ones like canals or ditches. And then the ones that are less straight and towards the coast and a little bit more curved, those are natural like rivers or creeks or streams. The flow of water in this whole sub-basin is either to the south or to the southwest or to the west into the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see in the very bottom left corner of that map is an inset, it's a thumbnail inset of this sub-basin in red there, shown to scale with the rest of the state of Florida. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so as a result of this mandate from the House bill from last year, the exercise was to look at the existing green boundary and from a scientific perspective, as I described, examine where potential revisions may need to be made. And so the team looked at the entire boundary as kind of a first pass. And then as a second pass, we identified these 9 areas shown listed here, A through I on the left side of the screen and shown on the map in a clockwise fashion. Each of these areas, it was determined kind of needed a deeper dive in the analysis to really figure out what was going on. And so the red lines you see on the map are the resulting proposed revisions that resulted from this scientific study. It's worth noting that out of these 9 that we looked at, 8 of the 9, in fact, resulted in a red line, a proposed revision to the existing boundary. The only one that didn't was letter D, which is the State Road 82 corridor that's shown there on the map. But all the other ones did result in a proposed revision from this scientific study. Next slide, please. And so this is the final product. Going back to the initial mandate from the bill, this map on the left is the final product that resulted from this project. The green line shown there again is the existing sub-basin boundary, and then the red line is the proposed revisions based on the scientific study. On the right side of the screen, you see the cover page from the corresponding report that was written that goes through and provides more of the background and the details and the technical information for that. Next slide. Mark, skip forward one more, please. And then one more as well. We'll come back to those maps as part of the discussion if needed, but let me go over the results here. And so the proposed map that we just saw is the final product to address House Bill 5001 from last year. That map was developed from district expertise, from GIS data, from permitting knowledge, and some other factors. We did consult with local experts, so some district staff from the Fort Myers Surface Center, as well as staff from the Big Cypress National Preserve. And then this report was reviewed internally by several district bureaus, such as the Water Use and Water Supply Bureaus, the Applied Science and Water Quality Bureaus, as well as the Ecosystem Restoration Planning and Everglades and Estuary Protection Bureaus. Additionally, numerous external briefings were held with local stakeholders there on the West Coast. And this report and the resulting map were submitted to meet that February 1st legislative deadline. So that's what I have for now. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Jeff, for the excellent presentation. Every time I hear you give this presentation, I always learn something else. So great job, and I appreciate it. Are there any questions from the board at this point? I'm not seeing any questions from the board at this point. Maybe they'll have a question later. Let's go ahead and go into Candida Heater's presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Basin Board members, and members of the public. Again, Candida Heater, Director of Administrative Services. So district staff, performs analysis similar to this, be it financial analysis or be it a policy review of any bill that is introduced during the legislative process. So this is a normal process that your staff performs that I'm going to present to you today. So if we could move to the next slide. Thank you, Mark. The analysis is based off of the Senate Bill 406 and the sentence in which is on this slide, paying particular attention to two portions of that sentence, being the basin ad valorem taxes levied, as well as the use of those basin taxes, focusing on projects and flood control operations and maintenance. So within the South Florida Water Management District, to the right, you'll see a map. That map lays out two taxing basins. One of those basins being the Big Cypress Basin, which is Collier and that small portion of mainland Monroe. And within the Big Cypress Basin, there are two taxes that are levied, the district-wide ad valorem, and then the Big Cypress Basin ad valorem. And then as you see on the map from Orange County, a portion of Orange County down to Monroe, the portion of Monroe County that is not within the Big Cypress Basin, is the Okeechobee Basin. And there are three taxes that are levied within the Okeechobee Basin: the district-wide ad valorem, the Okeechobee Basin ad valorem, and then the Everglades Construction Project ad valorem. The district-wide ad valorems, and both being for general purposes, used throughout the district. The basin taxes being used for basin works, basin activities, and then the Everglades Construction Project being used within the Okeechobee Basin to satisfy 373-4592, which focuses on the Everglades construction project and the long-term plan related to the stormwater treatment areas. So this slide is the actual analysis that your staff performed related to the current levy and then the levy after the change with the new boundary proposal. And these are estimates based it off of estimated taxable values. But the current levy, the way taxes are currently levied with the proposed boundary in mind, the Big Cypress Basin, Collier, and that small portion of mainland Monroe currently levies and has $11 million of district-wide ad valorem and $11 million in the Big Cypress Basin ad valorem. Within the Okeechobee Basin, Lee County areas identified in the boundary study currently pays about $4.4 million in district-wide ad valorem, $4.8 million for the Okeechobee Basin ad valorem, and then $1.5 million from the Everglades construction project ad valorem. With the new boundary and what the levy would then be Big Cypress Basin, Collier, and that small portion mainland Monroe, 11 million district-wide ad valorem, and 11 million in the Big Cypress Basin ad valorem, so no change. But then within the Big Cypress Basin for Lee County, the areas identified in the boundary study, they would pay 4.4 million in the district-wide, and then 4.5 million in the Big Cypress Basin ad valorem. So the change or the impact would be about a $6.3 million estimated cut of ad valorem revenue within the Big Cypress Basin. So that portion, those portions of Lee County would no longer pay the 4.8 million to the Okeechobee Basin or the 1.5 million to the Everglades construction project. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So then, as I'd mentioned, there were two, focus points in the sentence. The latter being the usage of those basin taxes. So currently, the way the bill is written now is it would limit the usage of those basin ad valorem taxes to project activities or expenses and flood control operations and maintenance. And currently, right now, there's about $2.6 million of funded annual Big Cypress Basin functions that would be excluded, such as land management, some regulatory obligations that the basin staff handles, water quality monitoring, and some administrative responsibility and management, and then some governmental contractual obligations, such as the $1 million MOU with the county and some State Road 29 obligations. So the next slide, please. Thank you, Mark. So in conclusion, pulling it all together, the annual recurring basin ad valorem funding changes, again, would be a cut of $6.3 million to the Okeechobee Basin, which covers, certain costs related to the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, stormwater treatment areas as mentioned, and the central and southern flood control system. And some of those examples will be the operations, of some of those restoration projects that are coming online, as well as current operations for the CNSF, as well as aging infrastructure and our stormwater treatment areas. It also, cuts funds that I mentioned, the 2.6 million for the basin functions that I'd mentioned earlier for land management, regulatory, etc. But then on the flip side, it does add $2.6 million for Collier County and $4.5 million for Lee County for projects and flood control operations and maintenance. So that concludes, the analytical or the analysis of the bill. And staff will continue to monitor this bill as well as others that are moving through session. And that's all I have. I'll take questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hayter, for that presentation. Are there any questions from the board for either Jeff or Candy at this time? Okay, if not, I'd like to go to public comment on this item. Okay, Aaron, public comment, please.
Madam Chair, Mr. Hill had his hand up, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Hill, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, questions. First for Jeff, just a brief response. If we have a significant water event, obviously I think we call those hurricanes, and the water flows change, could they change your in-depth, detailed analysis that you've done on the boundaries? Could that type of event change everything, and who's getting the benefit of all the work and the resources that are currently in play?
My answer would be no. I mean, the work we did was to define the hydrologic boundaries of the watershed. Your question might travel more into the realm of operations, and so maybe if Akin or somebody else there on the operation side could speak to that, that might provide it.
Okay, that's fine. I just was testing my understanding of a big event. All of a sudden changes the whole rules. And then if I could, Madam Chair, I had questions for Candy.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead. Floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay. So just so I understand what's going on here of this proposal. So then the project, such as we just heard about the very interesting study at Corkscrew Swamp, the next time we have Corkscrew Swamp version 3 or 4, whatever it ends up being, or in a different location, if this bill goes through, how you wouldn't be able to fund that? Would that be correct?
So for the land management functions and activities, no. Currently, the way it
Flood control
says,
only.
Yeah, for flood control operations and then for projects.
Okay. And then with a lot of the work that we're trying to do, because we have another issue called red tide, that although it isn't the primary purpose of this, the basin, but that's certainly an issue. So a lot of the projects that I know have been worked on in the past, I'm speculating have either a direct or indirect benefit on moving water where it needs to be. Those are all going to be in jeopardy. That's my question.
So if they're project based, like some of the things that Akin does, et cetera, and they're within the capital program, they would be able to be covered because they're project related. It's a specific project for the basin. But if it's operations, analytics, et cetera, separate from, then that would be something in question.
Yeah, water quality testing, that's pretty important.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll now go to public comment. Aaron.
Yes, Madam Chair. Up first, we've got Commissioner Hammond. Are you with us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Chair Roman and members of the board, congratulations. First of all, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak with you on behalf of Lee County. I'm Commissioner Brian Hammond. The Big Cypress Basin was created to serve the communities inside of the Big Cypress Basin watershed all those years ago. And as we all know, water knows no political boundaries. For years, as water from Lee County's land flowed to the Big Cypress Basin, our residents' tax dollars actually flowed to the Lake Okeechobee Basin. That decision wasn't based on science or hydrology, but rather it was based on politics. While we greatly appreciate our partnership with the South Florida Water Management District, and let me pause and just say we have tremendous confidence in the current management there and the board there. We really do appreciate our partnership. We have well-documented flooding issues in southern Lee County, and we need the money to pay for flood control projects to fix those issues. So, today's boundary study has shown once again that we have scientific evidence that recognizes that South Lee County truly is physically in the Big Cypress Basin, and Lee County commissioners are asking for our residents' tax dollars to be included in that basin as well and used for the benefit of South Lee County. I want to be very clear about this, though. We have no interest in using tax dollars from Collier County on Lee County residents. In fact, we support Collier being protected against such a thing from happening. We completely support the idea that's put forward in this bill that will ensure that Lee County's money would go to Lee County and Collier's money would go to Collier. We believe there is sufficient protection in this bill for both counties. I understand the concerns and would like to learn more about how we could improve the bill on the administrative side. Certainly, I would think if Lee County is going to join this Big Cypress Basin, we should be full partners when that comes to operations, maintenance, and administration as well, and pay our fair share. So I'd like to understand more about that $2.6 million. But I know our region is stronger together when Lee and Collier County work together and support each other. Delaying this change any longer would send another $4.8 million of Lee County residents' money to a basin that they're not actually in. So that money would be lost basically for South Lee County. Lee County simply wants to work together with Collier County to expand on the great work that the Big Cypress Basin has been doing to improve and enhance our natural environment locally, rather than continue to see our tax dollars go for maintenance of a flood control system that has no benefit for us. So with that, I'll close. I just want to thank you again. We're impressed with your work, and we're actually very hopeful and optimistic to become partners of yours, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Hammond, and we really appreciate your time that you shared with us today to make your thoughts known for the citizens of Lee County. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, next I have Joe Frank. Mr. Frank, can you please unmute yourself? Thank you. You've got.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. You've got 3
thank you.
minutes. We're going to start your time now.
I just had a question on the presentation that I believe Jeff made on the, I think, the drainage patterns and the boundaries. And I was wondering if that proposed change 8, which affects Southern Henry County, was made to allow Wingate Farms, the proposed structure there, to move their water directly to the east and ultimately to decrease the volume of water that was going into the OK Slough. I understand that by decreasing that volume in OK Slough, that opens the door for a lot more development in Collier County. But I can't really understand why that change was proposed unless it was purely for political considerations. So hopefully there will be some dialogue on that, and I will continue to drop in from time to time and listen in. So thank you for taking my question, and I give it back with plenty of time. Truth don't take long.
Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, sir. And I'm going to give Jeff a couple moments to look into that question, and I'll circle back with him if he has an answer for you this afternoon. Erin, is there other public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. I've got Councilman Bosch. Can you please unmute yourself?
Hello, this is Jim Bosch.
Ah, yes, we can hear you, Councilman.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairperson Roman and all you esteemed members of your board. If you remember, if I can have you recall, about a year and a half ago, former Mayor Peter Simmons from Bonita Springs and myself came to your board with the concept of the thought that we would like to you consider modifying your boundaries so that we, having some very similar problems, could share with you and could accomplish some of the things that we're not being able to accomplish at this particular time. We've had several meetings in this regard, and I am really on this message board to point out to you that Estero is strongly supportive of the boundary modification, especially since it moves the Estero River watershed into the Big Cypress Basin, which is definitely a strong issue that runs through our community. So we believe this would be a win-win situation, joining in with the Big Cypress Basin. We are anxious to see if we can move this forward. And I did ask I did invite our village manager to come in and give you some of the details that you may be interested in learning. So I'd like to turn this, my presentation over to Steve Arcosi, who is our village manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Steve Sarkozy and I'm village manager.
Excuse me, Steve, we're having difficulty hearing you. If you could speak up, please.
Okay, will do. Steve Sarkozy, village manager in Estero, and thank you for the opportunity to just provide a short comment. Working off of Commissioner Brian Hammond's comments, our interest here is to be in a win-win situation, not only with Big Cypress Board, but all of your member communities. We think there's a great opportunity to widen the district planning that is now going on within Big Cypress to include certainly parts of the Estero River watershed and the Imperial River watershed to encourage water retention, additional monitoring, hydrologic modeling, restoration of habitats, and also addressing some of the water quality and low water issues that were mentioned in the previous agenda item. We have looked at with great envy what you're doing in Big Cypress, and we think that broadening that approach to include all of the watershed makes a great deal of difference and could benefit us all. So there are opportunities here that address some of the longstanding issues that we've had in the region, and we'd like to be part of that and think this is legislation that would move us further in that direction. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we'll continue monitoring the board activity.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Bosch and Steve Sarkozy, for participating in our meeting this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And I certainly recall that first meeting, I think it was soon after I joined the Big Cypress Basin, that you, Councilmember Bosch and Mayor Peter Simmons came to the meeting to introduce yourself. So I remember it well. And thanks for joining us again this afternoon.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Aaron, are there any other public comment speakers this afternoon for this item?
Yes, Madam Chair. Up next, I've got Mr. Ottolini.
Good
Sir,
afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. I'm Roland Ottolini. I'm the Director of Lee County's Division of Natural Resources. I also want to extend congratulations to the new board members. Lee County staff agrees with the findings of the South Florida Water Management District's Basin Boundary Study. We've looked at and were presented the same presentation you heard today. We feel it's very scientifically sound, excellent job by their staff. And should these basin boundaries do expand, we're expecting further benefits to us. We currently enjoy a great working relationship with the Big Cypress Basin and Collier County staff. We already meet periodically to review our efforts being made in our prospective agencies. We address the water management issues and initiatives each of us are taking on. And so expansion of the Big Cypress Boundary will certainly solidify this relationship. Having the Big Cypress Basin oversight would provide a regional perspective to water issues involving 2 counties and several municipalities who are linked by common watershed boundaries and can help merge, improve, and implement these efforts. Presentation you heard earlier kind of leads credence to this opportunity. We have parts of Collier County that flow into Lee County through the Imperial River. And then we also have Lee County going to Collier through the Kokohashi and Flint Pen. There's possibly some opportunities in Lee County to provide more dry season flows to Corkscrew Sanctuary, through some of the improvements we're doing up there by Corkscrew Road. And also Kiker Preserve presents an opportunity to store some water and may also help restore some of the hydro period in the eastern part or west crew, as that may be. So again, we're looking forward to this partnership with you. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments this afternoon.
Up next, I've got Mr. Peter Hill.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Congratulations to the board members on their election, and good wishes to you too, Chairperson. In making my comments here, I've had 40 years of experience of reservoir models, which are very similar to the flow models that have been talked about. And I've sat as a board member of a large multinational oil company and looked at a number of major investments on infrastructure. And we've looked at all the various things that are being discussed today. So I've got some experience in doing this. One point I would raise, and I have immense sympathy for the other regions being considered here, but one things that have to be considered is the actual capacity of the Kokohashi River itself, which is at the northern end of the infrastructure that UBCB and you, Collier County, administer. And you've got to understand what is that capacity and what is that capacity going to be in the future. There's only one river. And there are, in the strategic plan for the Immokalee corridor, some 5,000 additional homes, as well as now the introduction of Estero, Lee County, and other areas, which are of a common watershed, there is no question. So that's the first thing, is actually we must understand the capacity of that river, and there is no current model that is available for analysis. First thing. Second thing is that who is accountable and responsible for the Kokohashi River? It is tidal, and in that basis falls underneath the Corps of Engineers, or is it you, the BCB and South Florida Water Management? But as I understand it, then your responsibility ends at Coco number 1, which is at the bottom end of Immokalee Road and Palm River Road. So we have to understand both the accountability and the capacity, and I leave it at that. Because it is hugely important that we understand what the capacity of our infrastructure is before we bring in other parties and before we truly understand what our capacity is demanded to be in future years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your comments this afternoon.
Thank you. And next I have Mr. Daniel DeLisi.
Good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations to the new governing board members. And again, thank you, board member and Chairwoman Roman, for all your leadership on this. Let me just make a couple comments, just by way of background for those of you who I've never worked with. I am a former governing board member and a former chair of the basin, also worked on staff at the Water Management District. I want to delve into the numbers that were put out there a little bit more. Candida talked about $2.3 million that would shift over from the Okeechobee millage to the Big Cypress Basin millage. I really want to sit down with her afterwards and go into that a little bit more. Certainly, there was a point in time where the governing board deliberated over what kinds of projects would be funded under the basin millage rates, and it came down to Picayune specifically with the Big Cypress Basin, and a conscious decision was made that the Big Cypress Basin would not shoulder the O&M responsibilities for Picayune out of the fund. And that was the case for the Okeechobee Basin as well. Certain projects were not to be funded. The O&M would not be funded out of the basin millage rates. That may have changed. I don't know. So, I'd love to delve into that a little bit more and understand it. As far as the question goes about the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary and the project, the legislation needs some changing. There's no doubt about that. Really was not intended to take away any roles or functions that the basin currently has. So I expect that to go away. But as far as the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary goes, that is the exact type of reason why you would want to expand the basin purview. It is because the water quality issues that sometimes plague Collier County originate in Lee County, and the fixes, or at least a portion of the fixes, are done outside of the political boundary of the basin, but within the watershed boundary of the basin. So that is why water management districts and basin boundaries are supposed to be drawn based on watershed lines. I do appreciate Brad Cornell's presentation. It was excellent, and over a dozen times he mentioned regionalism, being regional, coordinating with multiple local the basin should be doing and should be achieving and can do if it becomes that truly regional organization that looks at the entire watershed, not just simply a political boundary. So again, thank you all for your leadership, and you guys do fantastic work.
Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, and appreciate your comments, Dan.
I have no more public comments, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we had a couple of questions asked, and I wanted to give Jeff Uticello the opportunity to address the question that one of our public speakers had, if he's prepared to do so, on that adjustment for that item in your presentation, Jeff.
Yes,
It would have
Madam Chair.
been, are you prepared to do that for item D?
Yes.
Not D, excuse me, F.
Yeah, so Mr. Frank, thank you for paying close attention and for feeling free to ask this question. To just go back to some of the specific language you used in your question, this was not done for any kind of political, by any political methodology. It wasn't done considering who the landowner was or what the farm was. As I explained, this was strictly done on a scientific basis. It was driven by better data sets. It was driven by specifically with topography. Some of the elevation data that we have now has been improved from what was originally available when some of those lines were first drawn. And so our line is a reflection of better data sets. It's a reflection of an understanding of the drainage from, as described in the ERPs, as I mentioned, the environmental resource permits that these landowners get with the district. And so, and then again, just the general hydrology in the area. So to answer your question, no, it wasn't done with any particular landowner in mind or any kind of political reasons in mind. It was strictly on a scientific basis.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. And Keen, I don't know if you're prepared today. If not, we can follow up later. But the gentleman that spoke on the Kokohashi, I have watched him at other public meetings ask for the same thing. And if you're prepared this afternoon to at least address some of his question, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll be glad to talk to the gentleman later in great detail. But we do have a model that covers the Kokohashi and its contributing watersheds. And one of the reasons why we're very supportive of getting Audubon to build this model to the north was our model extends just outside of Collier County, and the work they've done in this area and the work that the coastal and heartland NEP folks are doing up in South Lee would help us further expand our models. But I think right now we have sufficiently well-developed and calibrated model to represent all the flows in the Kokohashi. We use that model to do the flood protection level of service work that we completed here about a year ago. We're using that model and a couple of other models developed by consultants for us, as well as by University of Florida, to do the Acune project. So I think we have sufficient tools to look at the contributing flows to the Kokohashi. We just need to get the question posed and make sure that we can set up the model to answer the specific question.
Okay, thank you very much. And so if the gentleman is still with us, listening to the meeting, you heard Akin Wasana talk to you about the model, and he's willing to meet with you afterwards or talk with you afterwards by phone or email, whatever, to fill you in on more details. So he's happy to have that conversation with you. Aaron, did you have something?
Yes, he has his hand raised if you'd like to speak with him otherwise.
Well, I think I'm going to move on right now to board comment. There are some board questions here, and Mr. Hill is first.
Madam Chair, I covered my questions earlier. I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Vice Chair Waters.
Question was for Akin, and maybe this is some of what Mr. Hill's question was versus what we've done in the floodplain level of service study. Seemed like one of the concerns from the residents when we presented the floodplain level of service study and looked at potential for flow from Bonita Springs coming in was our model stopped at Coco 1. And the concern was that the Kokohashi River itself downstream of Coco 1 was constricted. So I was curious, is my memory correct on that? Does our model stop at Coco 1? And is there anything on, if that's true, is there anything underway to look at, what the capacity of the river itself is downstream and whether that limits the canal system upstream?
Thank you. And your memory is not wrong. The modeling we did for the level of service work, we reported it as being reliable up to the coastal structure. And what we have done subsequent, and with your funding, was we've collaborated with the University of Florida and a company called Rieda to build a Flow 2D model of the coastal, the tidal portion of the system that we identified as deficient in our modeling. We did detailed survey, and they've put together this model. Actually, there's a training session going on right now on multiple users within the district and the county, and we offered it to multiple folks on the use of that tool. But it's a very detailed hydrologic model that looks at all the stormwater systems in the coastal system between the actual shoreline and where our model stopped. And then to support that modeling, we're working with the University of Florida on their CH3D model, which does the actual Gulf side of things. So today what we have are 3 models that exchange information: the UF CH3D model representing the Gulf and the surge effect, the Rieda Flow 2D model representing that coastal urban swath in the middle, and then the district's Mike 11 model, which is the same platform that was used by the Audubon folks, representing the inland flooding piece. So I believe that where we were short on what we could see 2 years ago, what we've done since is provided ourselves with the tools to be able to model the full reach of the Kokohashi River.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the work for the portions downstream of Coco 1 is ongoing currently then?
It is.
Those tools you're referring.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? I don't see any questions, additional questions, but I would offer that as we watch the legislation as it moves through the committees and as it takes its final shape, there are a couple things here to really keep your eye on, I think. And one would be this big Cypress Basin expense that is the administration of the Basin Board, the Basin Land Management, all of that currently is not captured in the language of the current legislation. So that's a $2.6 million possible exclusion. And then the other thing I think that is important here, because I certainly appreciate what the elected officials are interested in and serving their citizens in Lee County. That is for sure. And we have the South Florida Water Management District does have a agreement with Lee County that was signed in 2018 and has been in effect since then, of which we provide some additional funds for them to do projects to maintain some of their waterways. So I can appreciate the concerns and the interest here. And I think the other thing for the South Florida Water Management District also to consider, and it impacts the basin, we would grow. We would grow with money and we would grow in terms of the area that we covered. But there's other considerations that are going to have to be made at the governing board level. So the one thing I'd ask the board to concentrate on is some of these unfunded things that aren't in the language of the bill, okay, that are very important to us, because how would we make it up? All right. So good discussion. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Go ahead.
Just one other thought too. And sorry that you were on the way out of this.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
My other thought on this is watch the Board of County Commissioner deliberations on this a couple times and have a couple thoughts with respect to what they talked about. And to some degree, this bill is, I have a very little understanding of these things, but it's going through the House and the Senate. So as people that are looking out for the interests of the citizens of Collier County, it's something that, I think we need to watch out for and make sure that their interests are protected. One of my thoughts is the one in terms of what you discussed and the hole that will be put into the district budget when this happens, or what Candy described that will be in the district budget when this happens. It's a little bit drastic to do this in a handful of months and say, you've got all these other construction projects going, find the money for this in the next couple of months. And so I think what the Board of County Commissioners suggested, which was fine, let it go through the process, but the effective date falls later, would help the district be ready for this if this does indeed become an eventual, this bill becomes eventually approved and an eventuality of the expansion of the basin. My other thought is the Collier County statements basically had kind of a blanket prohibition that said Lee County money stays in Lee County, Collier money stays in Collier. I understand the philosophy of that. I think that's something that basically we may want to be careful about because, for instance, the discussion on the Kokohashi River, I would fully expect that water from Lee County is going to come down into the Kokohashi, we are going to have to plan maintenance dredges of that river basically in perpetuity. And so, that cost should not be fully borne on the residents of Collier County. And that's something we should share, basically the cost of that. And so if that prohibition basically is in place where the money is segregated one county to the other, that wouldn't be possible. So perhaps something where it requires a unanimous vote of the Basin Board to move money from one municipality to another might be a good idea. The other thing that I sort of get to on this is, at some point, if there is a hole in the basin budget, likewise, some more of the costs on Picayune may come back to us. I don't know if that's realistic or not, but certainly if, the hole in the basin budget causes that, I don't think that's something that we should fully bear responsibility for at that point. And then I think the last thing I would say is just from both, living here as long as I have, working for the district and understanding the needs of Lee County, I get why they have this desire. One of the things is, the Hurricane Irma in 2017 happened when I first started, and we weathered it really, really well. Some of our, no pun intended on weathering it, but some of our getting through it was essentially that, we have a flood control system that is canals that we can operate and manipulate water levels. Other parts of that is prior boards have over a long term invested year in, year out on maintenance and on upgrades of facilities. And I think that, in my opinion, is really desperately what Lee County needs. Is you've got these multiple municipalities that are connected by these waterways, and they really need just a steady revenue source so that they can deal with those.
Yes, it's easy to understand from my perspective what you just said in terms of why Lee County would benefit from this. There's multiple considerations on many levels with this, and we have to have a basin, a big Cypress Basin administration and team to oversee anything that we would do, and we might even need to expand that. And then at the South Florida Water Management District level, what's the impact on Everglades restoration when these dollars move, and if they move that quickly? So those are all things that need to be kind of kept in mind as this legislation moves through committee, and the staff and all of us watch what happens with it, because right now that would be an unfunded $2.6 million expense for the big Cypress Basin.
Correct. I would hope that would be a non-starter
Yeah.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. You're recognized.
Chair. One of the big discussions at the commissioners meeting was, or they keep putting on their letter to the legislators, is the unintended consequences. So it's easier to think of, oh, what unintended consequences are going to happen if we expand the boundaries. But if we do nothing, what are the unintended consequences of doing nothing as well? And not until this discussion, particularly on the Kokohashi River, was not clear to me. I did not see that discussion among the commissioners. But the umbrella over the basins is the South Water Management District. And any pressure that needs to be relieved between the two basins, if we actually do not expand the boundaries, then gets handled with the district, doesn't it? You're a member of
Yes, the district currently has an agreement with Lee County. And I know as a governing board member, shortly after I came to the district, I sat down and we talked issues with both the mayor of Bonita Springs and the council member Bosch, who spoke this afternoon, Village of Estero, with some of the senior staff from the district headquarters to talk about some of the issues in order to try to address some of their concerns.
So today, what they're trying to achieve with this legislation, with this bill, House and Senate bill, is actually being resolved at the district level. Is that correct or no?
Well, I wouldn't use the term resolved, but I would use the term addressed, meaning there is an agreement in place with Lee County that was signed in 2018. And I know that the first year it was in effect, roughly there was $250,000 that was given to Lee County for some of the work that they wanted done. But when Governor DeSantis came into office and he appointed a brand new governing board and we hired a new agency director, right away we upped some of those funds to $850,000. So for the last 2 years, we've been providing more money so they can get more things done. And the memorandum of agreement or the agreement that we have covers, I believe, 13 waterways. And of the 13 waterways, I think 8 of them are in the Bonita Springs, Estero area. Yeah. So there's always room for improvement with, how we work together and that kind of thing. But there is that agreement in place. And I share that with you just as information.
Yeah, and realistically speaking, while I was not aware or involved in the past 2 years until just now, realistically, if we revise the history, we didn't have this study that actually was scientifically based on how the water moves. And now we do have it. And in the meantime, we also had 1 year of COVID where it was more difficult to interpret and socialize the findings of the study. So I'm not quite sure that making a permanent change is in haste gives us a solution that seems to be addressed by the district today.
Thank you. A lot of good discussion to be had on. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Okay. I see no other board comments or questions, so we'll move on to the capital projects update. And we're going to have Lucine Dadrian, who is updating us via Zoom from Palm Beach today on our capital projects. Lucine?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Basin board members. Lucine Dadrian, I manage project managers that help to coordinate all of the capital projects that are either in engineering or construction. And I appreciate the opportunity to present today. Next slide. So the first project that is both in design and construction is the electrification and remote operations project. This project evaluated how often structures were managed for gate movements. And we determined that some of these structures would require an upgrade to push button operations. And then some structures, because of the daily operations of those structures, requires remote operations. So the purpose of this project improves operational response time, adds resiliency to these structures and the flood control in the system. It lowers the field station staff burden and increases staff safety. So this was again broken out into 2 packages. Package 1 for Cork 1, County Road 951 North and South, adds that powered operations only because of the how often the structure gates are operated. This package is in construction, and we are anticipating completing that construction in the spring of this year. Package 2 is in design and includes the Cork 2 remote operations, as well as Faka Union 5 generator building improvements, which will help with its remote operations. This will be advertised this spring with a start for construction in the summer. So here are some pictures of package 1. As you can see, at both County Road 951 North and Cork 1 already has a new gate header installed, new gate stem and actuator, and the project is moving along pretty smoothly. So the next project is Scada Replacements. This is a program that allows us to, it's a multi-year program for replacing or adding new sites. They're either standalone sites to monitor water levels or adding stilling well sites that are tied to structures for remote control operations. This helps to increase the ability to make real-time decisions in flood control, as well as dry season operations, adds the ability to accurately calculate and report flow rates for structures for both modeling and in operations. And currently we have 3 phases of work that are ongoing. The first phase is the radio upgrades at 95 existing monitoring sites. The parts and components were previously purchased in past fiscal years. And currently, over the next 2 years, we will be doing installations at these 95 sites. Package 1 is in construction, includes new sites at Cork 1, DeSoto 10, and a site between Golden Gate 6 and 7 structures. And this construction started this month. Package 2 includes new sites at County Road 951 North, AR2, and an upgrade to Henderson Creek #1 structures. This package is in design, final design, and we are looking to go out to construction this summer. Miller #3 gate replacement is in construction. This structure was originally replaced back in 2014. It's a 3-gated structure and has double leaf gates that have caused operational issues. So this project replaces those double leaf gates with single leaf gates and improves the reliability and operations of that structure and helps to restore the full flood control capacity as originally designed. This project is in construction and will be complete by this fall. The Cypress Canal Weir replacement project is based on the age of the structure and the need to relocate the structure for the Vanderbilt Beach Road expansion project. The district moved into design to move the structure south of the existing canal, working in concert with Collier County, where Collier County will be building the new canal and the district will be building the structure, and the county will be demolishing the old structure, and the old canal will be backfilled and the road will be expanded. So this new structure has a lot of improvements from the original design. It reduces operation response time and will be remotely operated. It will improve dry season groundwater recharge, reduce dry season discharges to Naples Bay, and increases the structure flow capacity by 22%. So as I mentioned, this aligns with the Collier County's expansion roadway project. We are currently advertised for bids, and within a month, we will have bids to review. And those bids we will review will choose the lowest responsive and responsible bidder and take that contractor to the April governing board to request approval of award to that contractor. So that construction timeframe is approximately a year, and the cost estimate is around $3.5 million. We also have a canal improvements program. The initial inception of this started with the level of service out of a Keynes group, modeling the canals and determining where we should do additional modeling and additional survey to help repair choke points in the canal systems. Again, this is a multi-year program to evaluate and improve flood management. The expected assessment completion dates for the I-75 Green and Cypress canals will be this spring, and the Miller and C1 canals in the summer. And hopefully out of the assessments, we'll know where we should start design, if improvements can be made, and structures modified as needed. In addition to the canal portion, we are also looking at the bank stabilization as an add-on to this program. The intent is to protect canal rights of way, as well as public and private infrastructure. As you can see on the left, in the left picture, the top of bank from 2010 to 2020 has eroded. And the fence along this area is our right-of-way line. So we have lost material, we've lost property, and the sediment ends up shoaling, adding shoaling to the canal, sediment in the canal, and reducing possible capacity. So this project, we're going to evaluate the whole system and prioritize and rank approximately 143 miles. But to start with, we are in addition looking at some prioritized locations where we know we have issues along the Faka Union banks, the Faka Union Canal. We have executed work orders for survey and are commencing with the design as soon as we have the survey data. One additional structure that we're looking at is the C1 connector canal control structure. This would be new, and this would come out of the canal improvements assessments. It would improve, adding a new structure along this canal would improve surface and groundwater levels during the dry season. It would be located near the intersection of the C1 and the Miller Canal. It would include improvements to the C1 connector canal. And a conceptual design for this piece will be, is anticipated in the summer of this year, with hopefully a design to start in the winter of 2022, or design completion in winter of 2022, and construction start in the spring of 2023. So the update for this year's capital budget, our approved budget is approximately $3,675,000, or $3,675,000. We've executed work to date around 28% of the budget. We have some upcoming construction contracts for the Cypress Canal, the electrification and remote operations package 2, and the Scada Replacements package 2. And with those contracts, we'll be able to expend the balance of the budget. And with that, I will take any questions.
Are there any questions from the board? Aaron, do we have any public comment on this item?
I have no public comment at this time, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Lucine, for the update on our capital projects. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is our consideration of the fiscal year 2021-2022 preliminary budget. Candida?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board and public.
Candy, you dropped out on us. We're not hearing you.
So I'm just waiting on the presentation to be pulled up, Madam Chair. I
Okay.
apologize.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. So today's presentation, we will go through some of the budget development milestones, as well as the current fiscal year 2021-2022 preliminary budget revenues and expenditures, estimated expenditures, and then the next steps. So to go over the budget development milestones, we do start developing and discussing the basin's budget around the September, October timeframe. Well, actually August and September timeframe, and bring a preliminary estimated budget, for the upcoming year to the Basin Board around the October, November timeframe. This year, we brought it November 18th to the Basin Board. And then we have, following that date, a January statutorily required submittal date to the Florida legislature, our governor, as well as those members within our counties. And that date is in statute for January 15th. And after the January 15th meeting, we're here today to discuss any changes that may have occurred from the November discussion to the submittal that was submitted in January 15th. After that, March 1st, we are to receive legislative comments on the preliminary budget, if there are any. Then the next date would be the April 22nd time period that we would come back and continue to discuss the Big Cypress Basin's budget, the 2021-2022 budget. And then July is another big milestone, being the time period that the Basin Board would approve a proposed millage rate for that basin millage rate and tentative budget. And then July 15th is another statutory date that we must submit a budget to the governing board. And that happens to be our next board meeting. And at that board meeting, the district governing board will approve proposed millage rates for certification to the property appraisers, which will include the Big Cypress Basin millage rate. And then we submit our budget to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, our partners, to review our budget prior to the submittal, August 1, which is another statutory deadline and date in statute, that by August 1 of every year, we are to submit a tentative budget to the governor and the legislature and those heads of our counties. August 26th, then we would come back to the Basin Board for a final millage rate and budget approval. And then that moves us into the September timeframe, where there's a final adopted budget for the district, which includes the basin's budget and millage. So since November, the budget that we had brought to the Basin Board in November was $14,537,280. At that point in time, it was a $221,600 increase over the adopted budget right now, which is $14,315,680. When we submitted the budget in January, the January 15th timeframe, the Basin budget that we submitted was higher. It was $74,187 higher than the November budget that we had discussed with the Basin Board. So the budget that was submitted in January was $14,611,467. That $74,000 increase was attributed to the personnel and benefit budget, more the benefits related to the Florida Retirement System, FRS, the employer's contributions. And it was within the categories of the flood control operations, modeling and monitoring support, service center staff and facilities, and the capital program support. Since the expenditures increased, you have to have a balanced budget. Staff had then, since the November timeframe, your district staff in the budget office continued to work on revenue projections for the overall district budget. And we had a little better estimates from EDR related to ad valorem taxes, particularly related to taxable value estimates. So we took a conservative approach overall statewide. The estimate was about 2% for the entire state of growth in taxable values. So we took a conservative approach and applied a smaller percentage to make sure we don't overextend ourselves. And we'll wait until, obviously, when we get the estimates, the true estimates in July, to bring back to the board. But we estimated a small increase of $106,658 in recurring ad valorem revenues that could potentially, cover or offset the $74,000 increase. With that, we also reduced then the need for using fund balance by $32,471, which then balanced out the revenues, the net of $74,187 to the increase of the expenditures to where you continue to have a balanced budget. So this is a comparison of the current preliminary 2021-2022 budget of $14,611,467 compared to the adopted budget for 2021 of $14,315,680. And as you see, the revenues are pretty consistent. Ad valorem, basin ad valorem taxes being the largest, revenue source. We did, as was mentioned back in November, reduce the investment income due to, the market, et cetera, and how the market is reacting currently. You do see a difference that was discussed about the service center lease revenue of $49,580, and that is since changed. So when we come back to you, we will have an update of additional revenue source pertaining to that service center lease, which will be additional revenue that will come in to the basin's budget for 2021-2022. So then where the money goes, or the expenses or activities within the basin budget. Again, a balanced budget, $14,611,467 for the 2022 preliminary estimated budget compared to the adopted budget of $14,315,680. Again, you do see very consistent, activities and expenses and percentages. There are some slight increases within the flood control operations. That was, discussed back in April, particularly related to the survey work for right-of-way and the tree management plan. And then some increases within the field equipment and fleet replacement of about $228,000. And that, is related to a 5-year fleet plan that your field station administers and discusses with the basin board. All other areas remained pretty consistent. Other than the capital program, as Lucine had just went over, was $3,675,000 compared to the estimated multi-year need of some of those projects, completion of some of those projects for the 22 budget at $3,545,000. So there was a small reduction there within the activities and projected preliminary budget. So the next steps, your staff, your budget staff and your basin administrator and your basin staff will continue to refine revenues and expenditures through the next several months to get us to the April and then get us to the July and then August timeframe. As you know, some of the plans in the current year may impact, plans that we have in place for 22. Projects speed up, et cetera. So that could be an area, as we have here on the slide, of potential changes within the capital program. Staffing allocations, what that means is that during the May, June timeframe, we submit to the departments a detailed personnel budget by person, and the managers allocate their staff in accordance to the upcoming work plan for the basin as well as for the district, and how those staff are going to support basin functions as well as district functions, and allocate out a percentage. And that then, trickles through the various programs and funds in the district, and that does cause some swing in some of the numbers. Also, your finance staff at the district is currently going through a financial audit with our external auditors on the fiscal year 2019-20 year-end balances and funds. And that audit is to be completed by the June timeframe, if not sooner. So we will have updated fund balances and be able to update the basin's fund balance and provide you that update in the July timeframe. And then, of course, as mentioned earlier, July, we get the taxable values by July 1. And if there are no extensions, we'll have that information to bring to you a accurate ad valorem projection. So with that, that concludes my presentation and update on the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Candy. Are there any questions for Candy from the board? As the new members will find out that we're always looking at the budget. That's one of the biggest responsibilities this board has in terms of being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. Thank you, Candy. All right, now to the technical reports. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Erin.
Sorry, I've got Mr. Hill.
He didn't appear on my screen. I'm sorry about that.
I was a little late. I apologize. I got to get quicker on this. Candy, real quick, what's the lag time between change in property values and the impact on ad valorem revenues? Just briefly.
So the ad valorem property values that will show up in your 2022 budget is based off of January 2021 taxable values.
Okay.
Okay, so COVID, for example, we went through COVID, last year. So impacts, if there are any, we were projecting should show up in these January taxable values. And then you could potentially, if you watch many of your discussions throughout the state of Florida, at your county and city and your local levels, as well as your economists at the state level, are saying that it could potentially still trickle into January of 2022 timeframe. So for your 2023 budget.
Okay, so but a little over a year-ish, over a year. Okay, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Mr. Hill? That was it? Okay, he's through. Any other questions by the board on the budget? Okay, thank you very much, Candy. We'll move on now to the technical reports. We have Juan Betancourt to give us the presentation on the Big Cypress Basin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, and members of the public. My name is Juan Betancourt. I'm the PCB Field Station Superintendent, and I will be reporting on the field station activities. I will be talking about the dry season activities being performed on the last quarter. So I'll be revisiting and talking about canal maintenance, vegetation removal, canal debris, structures, painting and cleanup, V-notches fabrication, the boat ramp repairs, and field station main entrance sign restoration, and of course, the 3-month outlook. So we've been working on bank repairs. So on this particular slide, you will see a picture of an area of the Faca Canal by FU6 structure, where we found some erosion by the canal bank. So I'm showing some of the before and after pictures. So the picture on the left, you can see the before, how it was, and the picture on the right after we took care of it, after the field station personnel took care of it. As a big part of our dry season activities, vegetation removals and cleaning up canals is one of the big activities taking place. This picture shows some before and after picture and after work on the Corkscrew Canal. And again, you see the cleanup of the tough booms and a picture of before and after. Henderson Canal, we did some mechanical harvesting, and for that we use one of our new pieces of equipment that we got about a year ago, and this is how we were doing the mechanical harvesting on the Henderson. And again, you see some before and after pictures. Okay, this picture shows the on the Corkscrew Canal. Again, some mechanical harvesting that we had to take care of. And you see, again, some before and after pictures. Again, so you're seeing some of the vegetation removal. This is in Golden Gate Canal by the GG5 structure. And you see the amount of vegetation that was there before. And then again, showing some before and after pictures. On this slide, I'm showing some more vegetation removal. This was, this particular canal is the airport canal. We had to do some mechanical harvesting in there. And again, you can see the before and after. Of course, along with vegetation removals, we always find different debris throughout the canals. The picture on the left shows some debris that we had to pick up on the Golden Gate by the GG1 structure. And that was just regular leaves and debris from cutting trees and stuff from around the area. And then on the picture on the right, you see the Henderson Canal actual mattress that had to be picked up by the field station personnel. This dry weather and cooler conditions allowed the field station personnel to start working on some beautification of the structures. This particular one is FU4. And this is where we actually went in there, pressure washed the whole structure, painted it, replaced some of the stain covers for the actuators, and replaced the signs in the whole structure. On this slide, I'm showing the V-notches that needed to be fabricated for Miller 2. As you can see the picture on the left, the before, the V-notch was completely eroded and with holes, and had to be replaced. So we fabricated it. The picture on the right shows the new V-notch that was fabricated to be replaced. And of course, as part of the dry season activities, we have been working on boat ramps. This particular one is in the Golden Gate Canal. The gate was destroyed by a car, vehicle that ran into it. So it needed to be fabricated and replaced. And again, I'm showing some before and after pictures. This slide here shows the fuel station main entrance sign. It was fading, it was in bad shape. The acrylic needed to be replaced. So we did that with a contractor. But then all the electrical was done in-house by our fuel station personnel. And again, I'm showing some before and after pictures. On the 3-month outlook, we will continue working mechanical harvesting, vegetation management, repairs, cleanup along the canal banks, and of course the weed barriers. We will continue our yearly work plan by pressure washing and painting of the different various structures. And of course, we will be supporting verbal operational orders from the water managers throughout the dry season and as requested on a daily basis. I want to go into a second part of my presentation and talk about the comprehensive Everglades restoration projects and the activities that take place there. So in order to operate, in addition to operate our normal activities throughout the basin flood control system, the basin field station also provides operation and maintenance of the district's CRP project in the Picayune Strand restoration for the Merritt, Faca, and Miller pump stations. So some of the activities that we've been working on for the dry season were test running and recirculating the pumps. We're working on the cooler water pumps, doing preventive maintenance on the lubrication water system, test running the generators for testing. We're measuring the water, the distance to water at the different pump stations. We're recirculating the fuel, test running the trash rake system. We're doing monthly preventative maintenance. We're, of course, doing inspections on all our safety equipment, housekeeping, and one other of the activities that I want to talk about is the bay level sensors that were replaced in the Faca pump station. On this slide, I want to show you the before, during, and after pictures of the cables replaced for the intake bay sensors. We replaced around 2,000 feet of cables. It was done by our field station personnel, and we actually had a savings of around $40,000 by doing it in-house. Of course, on our 3-month outlook, we will continue with our preventative maintenance activities for the pump stations, and we will continue getting ready for wet season as we move along. With that, unless you guys have any questions, that's all I have this afternoon.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question regarding the gate, the boat ramp gate that was damaged. When you come across a gate like that that's damaged on one of our canals in the basin, is there a report issued? How do we get liability for that type of damage?
What we usually do, we go there, we assess the damages, and then we get in touch with our district risk management office. They actually talk to our local officers and the county, and they find out the details on who was the one who caused the accident. And, we basically go after the insurance of that person to see if they are liable. They can cover for the expenses that occur within the incident, the accident that happened. So,
Is this fairly a rare occurrence, or does this happen a lot? How would you describe the frequency of?
I want to say in the last quarter, it has happened frequent. Cars going into the canal for whatever reason, car accidents, or just people just breaking it for, to go inside the canals and levees, and for fishing or just running their boats, jet skis. So it has happened lately, very often, I would say.
It might be beneficial for me and maybe the other board members as well, if you could kind of capture that on a quarterly basis, the number of incidents to kind of see, rather than anecdotal, asking you to think off the top of your head, if we can kind of see if there's a trend.
Okay.
Because it just seems we've had some cars, crash into the canals and stuff here lately. So I'm not sure what's going on, but
I will.
okay, I appreciate that. Any other board members have questions of Juan? Thank you, Juan. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I accidentally skipped over board comment, our first of two sessions for board comment, and I'd like to go back to that. This is the opportunity we have as a board, since we do follow the sunshine law and we do not discuss business outside of this meeting. This is our opportunity, if there's anything that a board member wants to discuss that they can bring up at this time. Again, there are two sessions. The first one comes at this point in the agenda, and the other one is right before we adjourn. So if you have something on your mind and don't think of it at this time, we can always get to it later in the agenda. Does anyone on the board have a board comment at this time? Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to the second technical report, which is the water conditions report with Mr. Brad Jackson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. It's a pleasure to be here again in person to be able to present the water conditions report since we last had our meeting back in November. With that, I'll just kind of roll into it as I usually do with our kind of monthly year-to-date summary of our water conditions. So starting off here in 2021, we're running a little bit behind average, or quite a bit behind average actually. Had a pretty dry January. And we're actually coming in around 50% of normal for this time of year, which was kind of predicted. It was well published, and I've mentioned it before. We were anticipating a drier than normal dry season, so it's actually come to fruition so far. And moving on from that, I'll kind of stair step through the conditions since our last board meeting, starting here in December. That was our last month where we came in a little bit above average, about twice. 200% of normal, thanks to an early December rainstorm that we had. Other than that, that's pretty much when someone flipped the switch for us and the rainfall stopped for us. So you've got here kind of the hot spots on the right. It was pretty widespread. We had a good 3 to 4 inch swath through the basin, and this was really a beneficial rainfall. We were able to hang on to most of it and within the system to help bring up surface water levels throughout the area. Just to kind of summarize 2020 for us as how much rainfall we ended up, and if it was average, above average, we ended up 99% of average, 56 inches of rain. So you can't get better than that, really. It didn't come, and the timing of it ended up pretty well for us. We were able to hang on to it. We didn't get too much at once, which was a good thing for us. So moving ahead here to January, there's not too much to tell on this slide, just other than it was dry. And we didn't really have any hot spots that stuck out as that was drier or wetter than others. It is a far cry from our wettest year ever in 2016 when we had 10 inches in January. So it's good to see we didn't necessarily get that much rain this year. And then February so far to date, we're a little bit below average, not too bad though. We just had a few cold fronts come through that did help us with some rainfall. Here in kind of the Henderson Creek area near the Faka Union watershed. So other than that, it's been a dry month, which is not atypical for this time of year. So now kind of talked a little bit about the water year summary that starts again in May and it runs through the end of April. kind of look at it as how much water do we have to get us through dry season. Again, this is pretty much average so far for this year. We've had just kind of refresh everyone's memory. We started the wet season middle part of last May with an above average rainfall. And the wet season was pretty, I won't say lackluster, but it was a little bit below average for the majority of it, but it finished strong. So we had December, October, November all coming in ahead of normal. We did enter officially the dry season after Tropical Storm Eta came through in the middle part of November 18th, actually. So with that, we've had, an average year. So that's how much rain fell. How much did we actually move through the system and out for flood control? This gives us a summary of our coastal structures and how much water and during wet season and dry season we let go through our tidal structures. The blue numbers is how much we discharged for wet season, and the dry numbers obviously are the ones that are in brown. And those are obviously much less than the wet season numbers. But I like to put it on there to show that flood control operations continue throughout the year, not just in wet season. So we're busy all year doing what we need to do. I do want to note here on the bottom right, the kind of dates. We do kind of get a shutoff point eventually where each of our structures stop discharging. Most of them have stopped at this point, all but two, GG1 and FU1 are continue to discharge, even though it is very small amounts, but everything else has pretty much trickled down since we've had a dry couple months. It's also unexpected for this time of year. So we've talked about how much rain we've had. What's the state of the system? What are our water level conditions? How are we doing? This is not the first time I've shown this graph, but the charts here, the map for this time of year, if you're looking blue or black colors, we're doing well for this time of year. We're higher than average and above than 75th percentile. You can see most of the basin, with the exception of a few of our structures or our reaches, are well above normal for this time of year. So we moved into water conservation mode early this year, and it seems to have paid off. Obviously, the rainfall from Tropical Storm Eta helped top everything off for us, but we are holding on to that water. Also here on the right, you've got the kind of snapshot in time from the 22nd of how the water levels are in the Crew area. And, for the most part, for the period of record of these wells, we're doing above normal for this time of year. So with that, I'll kind of move over to one of the new products I've got here, and let me talk a little bit about this. You might also see some of these on the district's website and their presentations. So this is basically a snapshot in time of our region, of the water level, whether it's above ground, below ground, and how that changes. Now, this isn't a perfect picture, and I want to kind of talk through this a little bit. It's really an interpolation of all the monitoring wells we have throughout the basin and the topography that we do have. So it's not a perfect picture, but it gives you a snapshot in time of what this looks like. So let me walk through this a little bit here. The colors here, if you're orange, green, blue, those are all above, the water's above the ground. So the places we want to look at is in this Crew area, Corkscrew Swamp area, and then also down here in Picayune on the south bottom part of the picture. And then over on the right side, you've got the Kokohashi Strand, another wetland native area over there. So this kind of shows you how much the area changes with time. So let's go back 3 months ago. You can see this is right after Tropical Storm Eta came through. You've got lots of blues and greens. This area was very full, as full as it got for that year or for last year. And you could see how that effect or the depth of the water decreases as you move closer to our canal system downstream here. You get yellows and greens instead of the dark blues that you have up here in the northern portion. I'd also like to highlight back then, right here where my cursor is, just above the P in the PSRP, which is the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. That's the Merritt Pump Station right there. So you can really see the effects of the restoration flows that's being sent south, and all of this area is now inundated with water from that time, from all the pumping that we did. Conversely to that, the Faka Union and Miller pump stations there, the canals are still present, so we're not doing restoration flows, so it's not unexpected to see it like this. But this just kind of gives you a picture of how the system changes and kind of how we plan and operate the system. And I found this hopefully to be a useful tool for the board and the public to be able to see a snapshot of the system rather than just a bunch of numbers and graphs. And to finish off on this slide, I put this one in here from 1 year ago, just to kind of give you a comparison. How are we doing last year versus this year? If you remember, last year was very dry in this dry season in March and April. But right now, if you look at the current, we're a little bit wetter throughout the system than we were 1 year ago. So we're doing everything we can we're set up well for the dry season, the peak of the dry season that's still coming towards us. So at this point, I'll kind of stair step through the system and kind of show you the trends and our targets and how the canal levels are doing. I've changed this up a little bit to try and consolidate and paint a better picture. Remember, this is the water level there's the blue line, the current water level for this year, and that has to do with that's the GG4 structure right here for the top graph. So the normal range, the kind of the middle 50% that the water level is usually in, if you're in this green band. So the takeaway here is we're running the system high above our normal levels that we have. We're still within our targets, which if you remember, that's these kind of shaded areas. But I also always include these because we don't always have enough water to hold the levels up within the desired range because of the way the basin is how the boundary of it is set up. But overall, we're running right at the maximum for Golden Gate, Maine that we've ever run. And then I'll jump up north a little bit to the Kokohashi Canal. You can see here, Coco 3, you've got a recession occurring. We haven't discharged any water this year really from Coco 3. We were even trying to hold it a little bit higher there than we have even the operational range, just a little bit, so we don't have any impact on flood control. But we're doing everything we can with the tools we have, and that controls water through this flowway that connects up to Corkscrew also. So we try and hold that as high as we can during the certain times of the year when we're able to. Moving over to the east, our FACA Union system, you're looking at FU5 on the north and FU1 on the south. Again, we're holding that as high as we can is the good news story there. And FACA Union 1, just we're running right where we should be given the lack of operational ability at that structure. And now our final one here, this is Henderson Creek Canal. And this one, it's such a small watershed that we do everything we can to hold the water in it. But the contributing area is small. We haven't had any operations in this particular watershed since Tropical Storm Eta came through. And yet the water levels still recede, just as they normally do. So it's not abnormal to see them going down like this. So just like JJ Juan talked about, they do some and support the SERP, the Everglades Restoration for the Picayune Strand project. We also do the same with the operations and decision-making for how those structures are operated. So what I wanted to show here, this is our Merritt pump station. Our targets are the kind of reddish color. And we're holding enough water up there to hold it up as high as we can. But if you remember back a couple slides ago, you still saw the restoration flows that were moving south. So we're trying to balance that so you get a good mix of both. But at this point, there's not enough water to have any more pumping. So we're probably going to be drying out through that area until the wet season really picks back up. Again, not unusual. I do want to highlight something though. This is our FACA Union pump station, and just recently the Corps of Engineers have been out there and they just mobilized, and this is the plugging of FACA Union Canal. So we now have our full operational capacity at the pump station now that this plug is in there. When the wet season comes and the rain starts again, we'll start to see that restoration flow moving south and providing flood protection for the northern Golden Gate estates. But we were out there the day they built this plug, and this is just one of them, the furthest north one at the time. This kind of boom right here, that's the actual intake to the pump station. And they built this plug. I think they were out there for 30, 45 minutes and they got that much done. It was pretty remarkable how fast they were working. So it was very interesting to see that go in the ground. So we've looked at the surface water, how much rain we've got. Let's move underground a little bit. Look at the groundwater levels for this time of year. The takeaway here is we're right where we need to be for this time of year. We're pretty much within the green bands, which is kind of the middle 50%. We're not seeing any caution areas or anything like that. So really we're set up well for water supply coming through the peak of the dry season as well. I would note here, this one here, C1004, that particular well, it's got a yellow indicator, but that you can see from the way the trend is, that happens pretty much every year. So it's not unexpected. And it really never gets to the higher concern where we really start to worry about water supply and harm to the resource. So we've looked ahead, or we've looked behind us and everything else. Let's look ahead a little bit. What can we expect as far as rainfall? This has been pretty well advertised the way I've talked, and then other other reports. We're still going to see a drier than normal rest of the dry season, more than likely. We're seeing above average chance for March and through April and May and June. That does flip flop as we get to the wet season, but that far out, there's not really a strong indicator one way or the other of what we can expect. So since we did talk about the drier than normal rainfall that we've had, I want to throw up here the kind of drought conditions, if we have any. So far, we're looking good. We've only got one little portion of Collier County and the basin that has a abnormally dry. It's not a drought yet, but they do have some forecast tools that they put out there. So for Southern Florida, this kind of beige color, we're indicating, there's drought development likely, which again is not necessarily entirely unusual for this time of year when we're in water conservation mode. But it does tell another tool to tell us what to expect coming up in the next few months. And that really finishes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any board questions for Brad? I want to thank you, Brad, for continually looking for ways to incorporate portions of your presentation that resonate with the public and with the board and help us understand the complexity of all of the water management and the decisions that have to go in. So I like your new slide, and maybe you can work on it a little bit more before the next meeting, but I think that adds to at least for me, it helped me with the understanding as well.
I would agree. These, it's been a little while since I've seen them, and the progression of how you're presenting the info lets you take in a lot of information at just a glance. And so I would completely concur with that. Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
Keep creating, because it's really paying off, and I appreciate that. Aaron, are there any public comments on the technical reports?
Madam Chair, I have Mr. Hill first.
Okay, great. He's not appearing. No, I've got a
Hey, I try to be real quick on this one. So, anyhow, Aaron's keeping track of my questions. Hey, Brad, a really good a presentation. I enjoyed it. Just a couple things in terms of water levels. It's my understanding in Lake Okeechobee are high, and then to the south, outside of our area of responsibility, also still high from the tropical storm last November. Just wondering if there's any impact upon our area of responsibility from those water levels in the lake and to the south.
Sure. For the Lake Okeechobee question, I mean, the way that our basin's laid out, the water levels in that lake and that system don't really have a bearing on how we operate our system, and they don't really affect the water levels in our natural areas.
Right.
Those are all sent, a different direction when possible. And that's really more of a Central and South Florida, district.
I understand.
Okay.
Was that it, Andy? Is that all you had?
Yeah, and to the south, that water's already come and gone. So that's not going to impact us in your management of the system, I assume.
Correct. Yeah, we don't. We look at the water levels upstream of our coastal structures for flood control.
Okay.
We're seeing the water levels actually start to recede, south, or the area that you're speaking to. They're actually starting to recede as well. You bet.
Thanks, Brad.
If the board members didn't see that excellent article in the Naples Daily News written on the Picayune Strand by Carl Schneider, I'd strongly recommend it. We were out there with the Corps of Engineers, and that plugging is extremely important. I thought that article was worth a read, so
Yeah.
I recommend that.
It came several months early, right?
No, it was just a visit this week.
We're thinking that they had started the plugging, they had moved it up.
No, this is the additional 3.3 miles of the FACA Union Canal. In discussions that I had with my governing board had on with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we were looking for opportunities to get more of the plugging done while the Southwest protection feature is being completed around the agriculture. So the modeling, Akina Awasana, who's left this afternoon to go back to West Palm Beach, but he was instrumental in that modeling to be able to show that we could do roughly 3 miles. So the Corps, in partnership with us, has begun the work. So this is new work, and we're very excited about it. Got to move this project along. Anything else for Brad? Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it. We now go to the Basin Administrator's Report. Lisa Keeler, who's joining us by Zoom today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to the board members. I really wish I was there with you today. It feels really odd to not be there, but needed to stay home today to make sure I kept everybody else healthy. So I am grateful to our wonderful IT staff, as well as our technical staff at Collier TV to make this Zoom meeting possible so I could still join you remotely. I have 2 things that I'd like to cover with you. The first is a payment of $1 million to Collier County. And that is consistent with an agreement that we have had with them for 20 years. I believe we are in year 18 of that agreement, where we pay them $1 million, which goes to their stormwater maintenance system. Every year they submit a work plan to us. We review it, make sure that the way that they're spending that money that is consistent, that everything they're doing has merit, and we review that. And just like we have this year, and everything seems in order, and we are ready to move forward with that $1 million payment. For the new board members, we might have covered this earlier, but just to remind you, this agreement from 20 years ago is to pay Collier County for the roads in Picayune Strand so that we could do that restoration project. So that is the agreement that we are paying today's money for. If you don't have any questions about that item, I'll move on to the lease for Collier County. As Candy had talked about in her presentation, one of the revenue streams we have is a lease to Collier County Tourism. They are in our second building there on North Horseshoe. And we have renewed that for 1 more year. That lease is going to go to the Board of County Commissioners at their at their last meeting in March. And then it will go to our governing board meeting in April. So the next time Candy comes before us, you're going to see some new revenue money coming in on her charts. And one last thing that I'd like to do is introduce Erin Connor. I know you all have talked with Erin over the phone. You've probably seen her on some Zoom meetings, but Erin is the newest member of our staff, and we are absolutely thrilled to have her with us today. As you can tell from running the meeting in the back of the room and hosting our meeting, she is very capable. She has great communication skills, organizational skills. It's just a pleasure to work with. And she just joined us in early to mid December. So she's only been with us for 2 months. And we are just absolutely thrilled to have her part of the team. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have nothing else unless you have questions.
Are there any questions for the Basin Administrator? Wish you a speedy recovery so that you can be with us next time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on then. Back to Candy Heater for our monthly financial report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the public. The monthly financial statement, if we can move, yes, thank you, is through the month of December. So for the new board members, we are in February. And if you may be wondering why we have a December statement instead of a January or February statement, the reason is that your finance staff do not close a monthly period until 15 days into the next month. So December did not close until January 15th or a little later if they had a settlement issues or anything like that. So by the time that we pull these statements, then run the financials and pull them, we're about 2 months in the lag. So with that said, through the month of December, you have collected the majority of your recurring revenues, which is within your ad valorem taxes. So you are on target at the 86%. You're actually slightly ahead, which is good. So that is a good indicator. I do want to note that under the current budget, under the other category, under the sources, you see that $1,000. That is for your field stations they sell scrap metal, etc., to bring in revenues for the basin. There is $49,000, $49,580 missing underneath that column, which is a typo. We will get that corrected and it will be proper in your next statement. The revenues of $18,676 is accurate. That is the amount of revenues that have been collected for that service center lease, as well as any small amounts that have come through on the scrap metal side. So I did want to point that out to you and it will be corrected and I do apologize. On the uses side, the uses, you will see the two categories in which you have the major part of your budget being under water resource planning and monitoring, as well as operation and maintenance of land and works. Those are state programs that are defined in statute as to how we are supposed to report and are to report our financials. You see that we have spent over almost $1.5 million, and you have large encumbrances. Large encumbrances mean contracts underway, which is good, a good thing. Those are your regional projects, as well as under the operations and maintenance, those are your capital program projects dominantly. So all in all, you have a sound financial statement. Your revenues look good. Your expenses are moving along. You're 41% obligated at 25% of the year. So it's a very positive statement, less that typo.
Thank you, Candy. Are there any board members who have questions for Candy on the monthly financial report? Seeing none, thank you, Candy. I appreciate it. That brings us to general public comments. Members of the public, if you would like to speak, you may use the raise the hand feature in Zoom. And if you're using a phone and would like to comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute your phone. Aaron, do we have any public comment at this time?
Yes, Madam Chair. I have Laura McKeever.
Madam Chair, this is actually Jesse Purdon from Bonita Springs City Council. How are you?
Great. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. My city manager is also on, and a couple other staff members. I just wanted to say that, I promised Peter Simmons before he left office that I'd pay attention to y'all, and I might be the newest one, but I've been following it through session, and I plan on following it all the way through. I just really wanted to introduce myself and say I'm very encouraged by the discussions we had today. Dan and Commissioner Hammond really nailed it. And I just wanted to reaffirm that you have a friend in water quality in Bonita Springs, and we look forward to working with you as this develops. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much for those comments, and I look forward to meeting you in person at some point. So thank you very much for joining us. Erin?
Madam Chair, I have no additional comments.
Okay, no additional public comments. We'll give them a few seconds just in case. Okay, so we're through with general public comments, which brings us to the final board comment. If there are any board members that would like to comment on anything, I'll go ahead and Mr. Hill, do you have any final board comment?
Madam Chair, I've learned a lot today. No, I don't have anything to add or any additional questions. I'm just taking in everything that we learned, and I have a long list of notes that I took today, and it was a very interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rivera, do you have any board comment?
No, nothing specific, except I wanted to acknowledge that Brad Jackson's presentation was very thought-provoking. I'm looking forward to the next one and start learning more about our real business.
System, right, great. Vice Chair Waters.
Nothing more for me. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank the board for such a engaged meeting today. I know it's tough when it's the first meeting, and I really appreciate the way we had such a constructive dialogue with staff and members of the public, and also with our presenters today. So thank you very much. I want to wish Andy Hill a speedy recovery so he can join us in person,
Look forward to it.
hopefully soon. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the staff, even above and beyond just their normal professional standard that they set each and every day. Today's meeting was a meeting with many moving parts. We had folks from Palm Beach. We had presenters from Palm Beach. We've had them in the room. We were set up for new board members and all of the public comment that we had. And I know that Rosie Bird came over specifically from West Palm Beach to just monitor Erin's first time. She's brand new, and she's running the Zoom portion of this meeting, and the IT staff that kicked in, and everybody else, and plugged in even Andy Hill to have his name show up on my request to speak screen. So hats off to all of you. You outdid yourself today. It was technically as smooth as silk, and I'm grateful for that support. Thank you so much. I know you appreciate doing it and look forward to setting high standards, but I want to tell you how much I appreciated it, and I'm sure the board did too. So thank you very, very much. And if there's nothing else that the board has at this point, not seeing anything, we're adjourned.
Thank you.